Welcome back to the deep dive. We are doing something a little different today. Usually when we talk about relationships or romance or even just deep human connection, we're analyzing the grand gesture, the boombox held high, the sprint through the airport, the big, loud public declaration of love.
The Hollywood standard. I mean, we're conditioned to think that if it isn't loud, it isn't real.
Exactly. We're trained to look for the fireworks. But today we're looking at the inverse. We're looking at what happens when love is entirely unspoken. And I don't mean unspoken just because someone is a bit shy or awkward. I mean, what happens when the environment literally doesn't allow for it? What happens when silence isn't just an absence of noise, but a heavy physical thing that actually, defines the entire relationship?
It's a powerful question, and one that actually circles back to how we process trauma and connection. To answer it, we're diving into a really evocative piece of writing. It's Whispers of the Shape of Love, Unspoken Affections by Abdullah al-Khalifa.
Which is a beautiful title, by the way.
It is. And specifically, we're pulling apart one story from this collection titled Letters He Never Sent.
And I have to give a heads up for you listening right now.
Right.
This isn't a light romp. We are not analyzing a rom-com here. This story is set in the trenches of World War I. So it is heavy, it is tragic, but it offers this fascinating case study on human connection under extreme duress.
It really does. Al-Khalifa frames this story not just as a tragedy, but as an examination of silence as a tool. In this narrative, silence functions as a shield, a safety mechanism. But as we'll see, the author also argues it's a cruel thief.
So let's set the stage, because you really can't understand the character's behavior or this specific type of silence without understanding where they are. The story drops us right into history. We're in France. The year is 1917.
Right. And the context is non-negotiable here. We're near the front lines.
Yeah.
The text describes the sensory environment so vividly, and it's awful. It talks about the metallic scent of blood that just hangs in the air, the constant low rumble of artillery, the sounds of wounded men. It's an assault on the senses.
It's sensory overload in the worst way. It's interesting you mention that because the source material makes a specific point about how the protagonist, Eleanor, handles this. She's a nurse in a triage ward right in the thick of it, and the text says she had learned to keep her heart numb.
And that's the key psychological baseline for the whole story. I mean, in modern terms, we'd probably call it compartmentalization or maybe dissociation. But the story posits that in 1917, you had a binary choice.
Yeah.
You either harden your heart or you let it break.
You can't function if you're crying over every single patient.
Exactly. Eleanor chooses survival. She shuts down her emotional receptors because feeling deeply in a slaughterhouse is a liability. If she stops to feel the tragedy of every soldier she bandages, she can't do her job. She essentially freezes her inner self to keep moving.
So numbness is a professional requirement. It's her armor. And into this armored existence walks Thomas Hale.
Thomas Hale, yeah. The text describes him as a tall soldier from Yorkshire. And this is key. He has kind eyes that bore too much sorrow.
That line jumped out at me. Kind eyes that bore too much sorrow. It implies he hasn't successfully numbed himself the way Eleanor has. He's still carrying it all.
Or that he's carrying the weight differently. The text emphasizes that Thomas is an anomaly in this loud, chaotic world because of his stillness. He seldom speaks. In a world of screaming and explosions and orders being shouted, he's quiet. But, and this is the classic show don't tell, his actions are incredibly loud.
Yeah, let's look at the data on Thomas, so to speak. He's carrying stretchers when he's off duty. He's sitting with young soldiers who wake up screaming from nightmares, just being a presence for them. And the detail that really crushed me, he's giving away his rations.
That specific detail, the rations, is just crucial character work. It establishes him as a man of immense empathy who is literally starving himself to comfort others. But note the method. He channels everything through service, not speech. He's a caretaker, but he remains isolated in his silence. He doesn't offer platitudes, he offers bread.
So you have these two orbiting bodies, Eleanor, who is trying to stay numb to survive, and Thomas, who is pouring himself out in silent acts of service. Naturally, in a story like this, they notice each other, but it's not a meet cute.
Far from it. There's no witty banter. The relationship is described as a delicate dance. It was built entirely on glances, brief, silent smiles in the hallway as they pass.
The source material has a line that I want to challenge a bit, or at least dig into. It says, "Neither dared to step closer. There was no space for love here." Do we buy that? No space for love. I mean, humans find space for love in the weirdest places.
I think we have to interpret space metaphorically here. It's not about physical space. It's about emotional capacity. When death is a daily visitor, as the book puts it, inviting love in feels incredibly dangerous.
Because if you love it, you can lose it.
Exactly. If Eleanor admits she cares for Thomas, she suddenly has something to lose. If Thomas admits he loves Eleanor, he has to worry about leaving her behind. So the silence is strategic. It's a form of risk management. By keeping the connection unspoken, they are protecting themselves from the potential grief of the inevitable.
It's safer to pretend it doesn't exist, a defense mechanism.
It's a defense mechanism against future pain. If I don't name it, it's not real. If it's not real, it can't die.
But, and here is the twist that drives the whole narrative, that silence was only external. Because while Thomas wasn't saying a word to Eleanor's face, he was having a very loud, very detailed conversation with her in private.
And this is where we get to the central tragedy of the story, the tin box.
The tin box under the cot. This creates such a stark contrast. By day, he's the silent soldier just doing his job. By night, while the others are, playing cards or sleeping, Thomas is writing. And he's not writing to his mom in Yorkshire. He is writing to the woman he sees every day in the hallway.
The letters in that box serve as a window into his internal world. And the contents. They reveal that his silence wasn't due to a lack of observation or feeling. He was seeing everything.
The details are gut-wrenching because they're so small. He wrote about the way her hair curled behind her ears. He wrote about the specific timbre of her voice when she soothed the wounded men. He noticed things she probably didn't even know about herself.
He wasn't just observing her, he was memorizing her. But I think the most heartbreaking part of the letters isn't the observation, it's the construction. He moves from documenting the present to constructing a whole future.
The dream life. He spends ink describing a future that just seems impossible.
Yes, he describes a cozy cottage in the countryside, a garden filled with wild roses, Eleanor reading by the window.
It's such a domestic, peaceful image, and it stands in such violent contrast to the mud and blood they were actually living in. Why do you think he focused on that? Why wild roses?
It's a kind of psychological counter-narrative. The war is ugly, it's loud, it's chaotic. So he constructs a world that is beautiful, quiet, and ordered. He created a sanctuary in those letters, a secret world where the war didn't exist and where they could just be two people living a quiet life. It's escapism, sure, but it's also a statement of hope.
But the kicker, the absolute tragedy, is the privacy of it all. These weren't drafts he was planning to send. They were unsigned. They were hidden under his cot.
It was a vivid internal reality that never touched their shared external reality. To Eleanor on the outside, he was just the kind soldier who smiled in the hallway. To Thomas, internally, she was the center of a future he was planning in ink, but never in voice.
It raises a philosophical question that I think El Khalifa is driving at. If you love someone with your whole soul, but it stays in a tin box under a cot, does it count? Is it real love if it's never transmitted?
That is the question. We tend to think of love as a transaction. I give it, you receive it. But Thomas's love was a solitary act. It was real to him, but it had no impact on her reality, at least not yet.
And unfortunately, reality has a way of crashing in. The story doesn't let them stay in this stasis forever. The unit receives orders.
And not just routine orders. They are advancing to the front lines. The source material is blunt. It calls it a suicide mission.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone in that camp knew what that meant. The odds of coming back were statistically, well, zero.
So the timeline for this delicate dance just runs out. This brings us to what I call the almost moment. I feel like every great tragedy has this pivot point. It's the night before he leaves.
The precipice.
He's watching Eleanor across the makeshift ward. She's working, hands stained with bandages, gritty, real. And the text says he almost walked toward her. He almost opened his mouth to speak.
And this is where the listener wants to scream at the book.
I definitely did. I'm thinking, buddy, you're leaving tomorrow. You're probably going to die. What do you have to lose? Just say hello. Just say, I wrote you something. Anything.
But he doesn't. The text says simply, but he didn't.
Why? I want to unpack that. Why, at the end of the world, does he choose to keep the secret?
There are a few ways to read this, and Al Khalifa leaves it somewhat open. One is the kindness argument. We talked about numbness earlier. If he walks up to her and says, I love you, and we could have had a life together, and then he dies 24 hours later, he has just given her a massive burden of specific grief.
He's handing her a tragedy she didn't ask for. He's breaking her numbness right before he leaves her forever.
Right. If he stayed silent, he's just another soldier who didn't make it. Sad, but manageable in the context of war. If he speaks, he becomes her loss. So silence could be seen as a final act of protection.
That is a tough, noble way to look at it. But is there a less noble interpretation?
Certainly. Fear. Even in the face of death, the fear of vulnerability of making it real can be paralyzing. If he speaks and she rejects him, his fantasy garden is destroyed before he even dies. If he stays silent, the dream remains perfect. It remains safe in the box.
So he preserves the perfection of the dream by never testing it against reality.
Exactly. He prioritized the safety of the fantasy over the risk of connection.
And so the sun comes up, the unit moves out, the silence holds.
And history takes its course.
Yeah.
Thomas Hale is gone. The suicide mission lives up to its name.
But the story doesn't end with his death. It ends with the discovery. Days later, Eleanor finds the tin box under the cot.
Imagine that moment. She probably expects personal effects. Maybe a watch, cigarettes, a letter to a mother. Instead, she finds dozens of folded letters.
And as she reads them, the realization, her name isn't written. He never wrote Dear Eleanor. But she knew.
She had to know. The descriptions were too specific, the way the hair curled, the voice. She is reading a diary of a love affair that never actually happened in the physical world, but was fully alive in his mind.
The source says she read them repeatedly, tears staining the ink. It's devastating because she's meeting him for the first time, effectively, but he's already gone.
The connection is finally made, but the circuit is broken. There is no feedback loop.
The war ends a year later. Eleanor leaves the field. But the text says she never truly left him behind. She kept the letters. And I love this visual detail. She kept them tucked in a drawer beside a pressed wild rose.
That is a beautiful, tragic detail. She took the imagery from his dream, the garden he never got to build, and she made a small piece of it real. She validated his fantasy, even if he wasn't there to see it. It's her way of speaking back to him into the void.
So we need to zoom out here. What is Abdullah al-Khalifa trying to tell us? Because the story ends with a very specific, very provocative quote. He never said a word, yet in silence, he loved her louder than most ever dare.
It's a romantic sentiment, isn't it? It validates the depth of introvert love or silent love. Al-Khalifa is suggesting that love isn't defined by the performance of it. It's defined by the presence and the space between two people. He's arguing that Thomas's love was valid, potent, and loud in its intensity, regardless of whether it was spoken.
I get that, but I want to push back on it, or rather, I think the story pushes back on it, because the source also calls silence the cruelest thief of all.
And that, for me, is the real takeaway. It's a paradox. The silence kept the love safe in a box. It was uncorrupted by the war. It was never rejected. It never became mundane. But the silence stole the opportunity for reciprocity.
It stole the chance for Eleanor to look Thomas in the eye and say, I see you too.
It stole the shared reality. Thomas assumed his actions, the rations, the smiles, were enough. Or maybe he just hoped they were. But the letters prove there was so much more he wanted to give. The thief of silence took that possibility away.
It really makes you think about the arrogance of silence.
The arrogance, how so?
Well, the arrogance of assuming we have more time, or the arrogance of assuming people just know how we feel. We think, oh, I did the dishes, they know I love them, or I hung out with them, they know I care.
That's a great point. We are terrible mind readers. We usually just project our own insecurities onto other people. Eleanor might have thought Thomas was just a nice guy who was quiet. She couldn't know she was the love of his life without the words. Al-Khalifa notes in the background section that some books aren't written to impress, they're written to understand. This story forces us to understand the cost of safety.
The cost of safety is isolation.
Yes, you are safe from rejection, but you are isolated from connection.
It really highlights the difference between an internal truth and a shared truth. Thomas had a truth. He loved her, but they didn't have a shared truth until it was too late to do anything about it.
And that applies to more than just romance in 1917. Think about friendships, family relationships. How many things go unsaid because we were waiting for the perfect time?
Or because we were scared of ruining the dynamic. If I say this, it gets weird.
Right. But this story serves as a reminder that waiting for the safe time usually means waiting till it's too late. Time is the one variable you can't control.
It's a massive emotional arc for such a short story.
Yeah.
From the numbness of the trenches to the vulnerability of the letters. If you are the kind of listener who appreciates this sort of thing, stories that are honest, reflective, quietly emotional, you really should check out the full collection. It's called Whispers of the Shape of Love by Abdullah al-Khalifa. It's available as an ebook on Amazon Kindle.
It's definitely worth a read if you want to explore those quieter, darker corners of human emotion. It's not a beach read, but it stays with you.
Before we go, I want to leave you with a thought. We talked about Thomas's tin box, the box where he hid his real self to keep it safe. I want you to ask yourself, is there a tin box in your own life right now?
That's the question.
Are there words or feelings or confessions you are keeping safe in silence? Are you waiting for a moment that hasn't come yet? Because if this story teaches us anything, it's that the safety of silence is an illusion. It doesn't protect the relationship, it just freezes it. Sometimes you just have to send the letter.
Don't let the silence become a thief.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you next time.